All right, so now it's time for item two. As you can see, item two is worth 25% of your grade, less than the other two because it's a little less involved in how much instruction I give you and how many, how much, the extent to which I have requirements or additional requirements beyond those in writing. Let's go ahead and complete step one, which is basically the same as all the other steps, except the content's different for the other items. As you probably know, the United States now has more than one vaccine for COVID-19, one from BioNTech and another from Moderna. More providers will soon add their version of the vaccine to the market, or they currently are, or by the time you're listening to this and following this video, there are more vaccines out there. And of course, countries have their own. Each country some countries are inventing their own or creating their own. Do you think it would be morally permissible for the U.S. government to make a law requiring everyone in the U.S. to get the COVID-19 vaccine or to get a COVID-19 vaccine? So when I say the COVID-19 vaccine, I really mean any COVID-19 vaccines. But the idea is that you'd have to get one of them. So as you know, you have a couple options. If you're ready to take a definite position with respect to this question, then you're going to copy this sentence. You'll modify, of course, this part, and then you'll offer 3 additional sentences of support. For this particular prompt, I do not have you defining a word, so don't worry about that in this one. But you know from what I said about item 1, generally, you know what's going on here. You know that basically this is the conclusion, and these statements should be giving support for your conclusion. That is, the statements comprising this part should offer reasons. And you already know that this is a conclusion, may turn out to be a main conclusion depending on what you write up for either this part or this part. But you know in here, in this one, you're definitely going to have a reason in support of a minor conclusion, and you'll have another minor conclusion with another reason. And you know in here, you'll have some reasons. You might have a minor conclusion. So right now, I should say minor. So if you do this option, again, this is going to turn out to be a main conclusion. If you did this option, this may or may not be a main conclusion. Okay, so I'm not going to regurgitate in detail everything that I've already said that basically applies from item 1 to item 2. What I am going to do is just do a little bit of lecture that might help you formulate your thoughts. So let's talk about a definite position, and some of this might apply to your thinking about over here to get your juices going. So what I'm trying to get you to do here is to, if you're doing a definite position or even here, is to think about what is your moral conclusion. Do you think it's morally permissible? In other words, if you say it's morally permissible for the government to make everyone get vaccinated for COVID-19, what you're saying is it would not be wrong. They don't have to do it. The government doesn't have to make everyone do it, but it would not be wrong if they did it. So that's what we mean by morally permissible. Okay, so just make sure that you understand that. You might even want to take a note. If you want help from me at any point, I would expect to see that you've written down what I said about what it means for something to be morally permissible, at least from the standpoint of the philosophical branch of ethics. Okay, so if you're undecided, maybe that's because you're not sure. Maybe you're thinking, well, maybe it's wrong. It would be wrong of them to do that. But at the same time, I could see why it might not be wrong. And in fact, you might even have in mind the stronger claim that the United States the government is morally obligated. It would be wrong if they didn't make everyone get vaccinated. But I just want to know whether or not it's morally permissible. So do you think it would be okay if they did it? In other words, it wouldn't be wrong. You could go ahead and add that you think that the government's actually morally obligated, but the conclusion is about moral permissibility. And we'll learn more about that later. Now, whatever response, okay, so let's actually focus on this one right here. So in your reasoning, you should try to include what's called a general moral principle. And a general moral principle basically is a broad rule that you can use for deciding, whether something's right or wrong. So I'm going to give you some ideas. I'm going to ask you questions that can help you formulate one of your statements as a general moral principle. If you are struggling with this, don't worry about it too much, but try your best, okay? Because we're going to learn more about that later. But a question that can help you, and notice that you could turn some of my questions into a statement if you like. But one way to think about general moral principle is, what makes something right? What is a general rule for deciding when something is right, when something is wrong, when something's morally permissible? Maybe, so think about this question in terms of formulating this statement. Do you think it's better to go with do you think that the right action is the one that would produce the best balance of happiness, um, or you could say pleasure or benefit or advantage, the best balance of that happiness over unhappiness, or we could say, with respect to unhappiness, pain or disadvantage, right? Do you think for all involved, not just for the entity or person making the decision, but anyone that could be affected by the decision? So maybe you can use that question to formulate a kind of a general rule. So what is the right action? Is it for you the one that is going to produce the best balance of happiness, pleasure, advantage over unhappiness? So you can think of that as pros and cons. So you might want to think about that, and then you can elaborate on that. So then you'd want to tie that specifically to the conclusion. Do you think that making everyone get vaccinated is going to produce the best balance of pleasure over pain? If so, in what ways? What are the pros of making everyone get vaccinated? What are the cons? What would be the pros of not making everyone get vaccinated? What would be the cons of not making everyone get vaccinated? Which result is going to be better? Getting everyone vaccinated or not getting everyone vaccinated? Or is there some negative consequence for the government making a law that forces everyone to get vaccinated that outweighs any positive advantages of making everyone get vaccinated? So use all of the questions and everything that I've just said, use it as your food for thought, incorporate as needed in formulating your argument. Now, it could also be that you don't think the practical consequences matter. You think that there are just certain duties. And so you might want to use that kind of terminology, talk about duties. So duties are moral obligations that we have, and we have to follow them. We have to do our duties. We have to do what is stated within a duty statement, no matter what the practical or consequences are. So in this case, maybe we have a duty to protect the public health. If this is a duty, then we have to fulfill this duty however we can, and it doesn't matter what the consequences are outside of public health. So let's say that someone says, yeah, but I'm going to lose my right to make my own choices if the government makes that a law. Well, you can say that doesn't matter. We have an absolute duty to protect the public health. So if you want to use that as your general moral principle, you can. You can say we have an absolute duty, meaning we're morally obligated to. So you can say we have an absolute duty, or that we're always morally obligated to protect the public health. So that could be like your general moral principle. And then you would connect that to what you say to your conclusion if you do think it's morally permissible for the government to make that law. Now, it could be that you have this other duty. Okay, maybe you think this duty should override that duty. So this other duty that I'm thinking of that you might want to incorporate into your reasoning is whether or not it has to do with maybe you think that we have an absolute duty to respect the individual's right to self-determination. Okay, so what do we mean by self-determination? I'm going to let you look that up. Maybe you want to use that as part of your reasoning. So again, maybe you're focused on the concept of duty, and doing your duty is what's more important to you when you're thinking about which action is right and wrong. And in particular, you think that a duty to respect the right to self-determination is more important than the duty of protecting the public health. So if you think a duty to right to self-determination outweighs a duty to promote the public health, then you think letting people make their own choices is more important than whatever could happen if people aren't masking. You know, maybe some people are going to die, maybe they're not. Those are practical consequences. What matters most is the duty to respect, people's right to self-determination. And again, you can incorporate what I've said into your reasoning if that seems to fit in with how you think. But I'm encouraging you to just know that if you're talking about duties, you're talking about duties that must be fulfilled by everyone in all situations, in all circumstances, at all times. It doesn't matter what the practical consequence is. It's the principle of the matter, right? So it's either wrong in and of itself, regardless of practical consequences with respect to the duty that you're talking about. So there's some food for thought in getting you to think about, how you can support your conclusion that it is that it would be or would not be for the government to make everyone get vaccinated. You can still use a lot of what I said with respect to right here. Okay, you're just going to have to think you can still incorporate what I said. It's just going to work slightly differently in your reasoning here. That's all I have for you.